the healthy bodies today. So it's about correctly using and interpreting the health terminology that describes the normal structure and the function and the location of the body systems. And you have had all the pictures around you all this time, and I'm sure that has intrigued you already before, and looking at all the different body parts. So sort of helps, yeah, in preparation for today's unit. And I've got a lot of nice little videos that I've got off YouTube that describes the body systems really well, and it's really interesting. So I might just close that door. Very loud. If you want to sit that fan on your rock, it gets a bit stoppy. There's not that many of us today, so it should be fine. Okay. Did you lose something? So there is 11 main body systems that we will discuss through the video. Obviously, there's subsystems, and sometimes they refer to them as well as body systems, and sometimes the names can be a little bit tricky. So you get cardiovascular, and then you get just vascular. And sometimes even they would refer to it to another wording. So it's all just, yeah, we we'll use the names that is on the wall on the video, on the big posters, and those are the ones that I've also got on this picture. Starting just as an overview with integumentary system, the muscular system, the skeleton system, nervous system, endocrine system. You see the circulation system, it says here, and then it says vascular system on the wall, and then in a different place it says cardiovascular. Those are all three the same. Lymphatic system, respiratory system, digestive system, urinary system, and the reproductive system. And we'll start with the main body part. And you know what I've always thought, my husband's a mechanic, and I've always thought, the body is a bit like a car. The one system, every system has its own function, really. So like if you think about a car and you think about the battery in the car, so the car will not run if the battery is flat. And all the bits that is attached to the battery. So and it sits different from the fuel system, but it still depends on one another. So with the cardiovascular system, it's of course it's our heart and all the veins that goes with the heart. And I've got a nice little illustration for that. So I'll just play that.
Your heart is a pump. It's a muscular organ about the size of your fist and is located slightly left of center in your chest. Your heart is divided into the right and left side. The division protects oxygen-rich blood from mixing with oxygen-poor blood. Together, your heart and blood vessels comprise your cardiovascular system, which circulates blood and oxygen around your body. In fact, your heart pumps about 5 quarts of blood every minute, and it beats about 100,000 times in one day. That's about 35 million times in a year. Oxygen-poor blood, blue blood, returns to the heart after circulating through your body. The right side of the heart, composed of the right atrium and ventricle, collects and pumps the blood to the lungs through the pulmonary arteries. The lungs refresh the blood with a new supply of oxygen, making it turn red. Oxygen-rich blood, red blood, then enters the left side of the heart, composed of the left atrium and ventricle, and is pumped through the aorta to the body to supply tissues with oxygen. 4 valves within your heart keep your blood moving the right way. The tricuspid, mitral, pulmonary, and aortic valves work like gates on a fence. They open only one way and only when pushed on. Each valve opens and closes once per heartbeat, or about once every second. A beating heart contracts and relaxes. Contraction is called systole, and relaxing is called diastole. During systole, your ventricles contract, forcing blood into the vessels going to your lungs and body, much like ketchup being forced out of a squeeze bottle. The right ventricle contracts a little bit before the left ventricle does. Your ventricles then relax during diastole and are filled with blood coming from the upper chambers, the left and right atria. Then the cycle starts over again. Your heart is nourished by blood too. Blood vessels called coronary arteries extend over the surface of your heart and branch into smaller capillaries. Here you can see just the network of blood vessels that feed your heart with oxygen-rich blood. Your heart also has electrical wiring, which keeps it beating. Electrical impulses begin high in the right atrium and travel through specialized pathways to the ventricles, delivering the signal to pump. The conduction system keeps your heart beating in a coordinated and normal rhythm, which in turn keeps blood circulating. The continuous exchange of oxygen-rich blood with oxygen-poor blood is what keeps you alive.
Lovely. So our next little video is talking about the blood pressure, and I've actually got a blood pressure monitor, so we will play with it maybe after the session today. You all can have a go at each other. We know that mostly when you go and you work with a client with a blood pressure monitor, you'll probably land up using one that is, you know, an electronic one that does it automatically. But if it does come down to it and you don't have that electronic one, and there's also only the old one left, you need to know how to use the old one. So the videos, the two videos I have described blood pressure, we'll talk a bit about blood pressure.
This video will help you understand how blood pressure is controlled in your body. Blood pressure is the amount of force caused by blood pressing against the walls of your arteries. It is tightly controlled to ensure sufficient blood reaches all parts of your body. Arteries are blood vessels that carry blood away from your heart to your tissues. This blood supplies your tissues with the oxygen and nutrients they need to function. In your heart, there are two lower chambers called ventricles, which contract with each heartbeat. The right ventricle pushes oxygen-poor blood to your lungs to pick up oxygen, and the left ventricle pushes oxygen-rich blood through your arteries to your body. As blood flows through your arteries, four main factors affect the pressure on the artery walls. The first is the amount of blood your ventricles push out of your heart each minute, also known as cardiac output. Your blood pressure goes up as cardiac output increases. The second factor affecting your blood pressure is the total amount of blood in your body, or blood volume. Blood pressure also goes up as blood volume increases. The third factor that affects your blood pressure is resistance. Resistance is anything working against the blood flow through your arteries. Resistance is mainly affected by the width of your arteries. Your body is able to increase the width of your arteries to lower your blood pressure. Or it can reduce the width to raise your blood pressure. The fourth factor that affects your blood pressure is viscosity. Viscosity is how thick your blood is. In your blood, more particles, such as proteins and fat, increase viscosity. If your blood is thicker, your blood pressure goes up as your heart works harder to push it through your arteries. If you have questions about high blood pressure or any medications you have been prescribed, speak with your doctor. It is important to take your medications as directed and report any side effects you have.
And the next one is just showing us how to take the blood pressure. I'm just going to pause for a sec. Just this Osmed is a really good online training thing to join or subscribe to. They've got all these short videos, 4-minute videos that is free, and they keep a record of everything you've done. So occasionally you can go and print out the record and attach that to your resume as well. OSMED. So it's I'll just I'll start this again so you can see.
So what is it? Like email or something? Like
They're just like a online platform, training platform. So you just create an account and you know, you just join OSMED, and they keep a record of that. So you can pay, it's $1 a day, so it's $30 a month. I don't pay. You know, to me, that's, if I need it, I will pay for it. And I've been a member of it for a long time, but just you can get all the short videos. That is sufficient for us, because we don't need to keep all that record of certain hours. So this, it's actually aimed at our engineers to keep registration. They need to do a certain amount of training every year, so they can do that through here. But they do the subjects that concerns us, like you know, restrained and maybe falls and old people or anything like that that really concerns us. Those are usually short 4-minute videos like this blood pressure one, and they're normally free. So it's nice because there's a lot of videos as well. It's a little, it's like, and most of us learn, you know, when we can do it visual like that as well as reading. So
Step-by-step guide on how to take a blood pressure measurement. 1. Initial preparation. Firstly, introduce yourself and verify patient identity using your clinical setting protocol. Obtain consent from the patient for the assessment and explain the procedure. Ensure that the patient has not had any caffeine or tobacco in the last 30 minutes. The patient should be allowed to rest for 5 minutes following the activity. Prepare the environment by making the room quiet, ensure patient privacy, and equipment is clean and intact. Blood pressure is measured indirectly with a stethoscope or Doppler and a stick manometer. The stick manometer includes the blood pressure cuff, connection tubes, air pump, and manometer.
sticknometer, like a stick.
Several sizes, and the size of the cup bladder should be 8% of the circumference of the leaf cells. Finally, perform hand hygiene before you start the procedure. 2. Choose a measurement site. The preferred site is the brachial pulse site, where the brachial artery runs across the antecubital fossa. Another site is the posterior thigh, where the popliteal artery runs behind the knee joint. A site should be free from pain, injury, surgical incisions, intravenous cannulas, central venous or arterial lines, areas with poor perfusion, AV fistulas, and AV shunts. This reduces the risk of patient harm and helps ensure result accuracy. 3. Position the patient either sitting, standing, supine, or prone, depending on your choice of measurement site. If sitting, their feet should be flat on the floor. The limbs should be fully exposed so the cuff can be correctly applied. Do not apply the cuff over clothing. If using the arm, patients should be supported so that the midpoint of the upper arm is level with the heart, with the elbow extended and the palm facing upward. Then palpate the brachial artery to identify location and apply the cuff directly over the brachial artery. There is usually an arrow to indicate the center of the cuff, which should be directly above the brachial artery. Wrap the fully deflated cuff snugly about 2.5 centimeters above the antecubital fossa and secure. Using the leg, position the leg so that it is at an equal level to the heart. Then wrap the cuff around the thigh with the bottom of the cuff slightly above the knee. The popliteal artery will be used for blood pressure measurement. This is easier if the patient is in a prone position. Please note that the systolic blood pressure in the popliteal artery is usually 20 to 30 millimeters of mercury higher than in the brachial artery. palpate the artery to determine the systolic blood pressure. This ensures that the auscultatory gap does not interfere with the accurate reading of the blood pressure. Inflate the blood pressure cuff and note when the pulsation is no longer palpable. Release the cuff and wait 1 to 2 minutes. 5. Position the stethoscope over the brachial artery and use the bell side of the stethoscope. If a Doppler is being used instead, apply conducting gel to the site where the pulse distal to the blood pressure cuff was palpated. 6. Auscultate the blood pressure. Pump up to 30 millimeters of mercury above the palpated systolic blood pressure. Slowly release the pressure so that it falls by 2 to 3 millimeters of mercury per second. Note the manometer reading at Krotkoff phases 1, 4, and 5. Continue to listen for another 30 millimeters of mercury after it's gone silent. And then deflate the cuff rapidly. 7. If a repeat blood pressure measurement is necessary, wait 2 minutes before inflating the cuff again. 8. If required for your assessment, repeat the procedure on the other arm or in a standing position to gain a postural blood pressure measurement. 9. Remove the cuff. 10. Advise the patient of the result. 11. Clean and return the equipment. 12. Document. Results and documentation. Blood pressure is recorded as a fraction, with the top number representing the systole and the bottom number representing the diastole. If first and second diastolic are recorded, the first diastolic is written over the second. For example, 120 over 90 over 80. Documentation post the assessment is essential and should include the location the BP was taken and any factors that may have impacted the result. Further, it is important that health professionals note that any drastic changes in blood pressure can be a sign of clinical deterioration. Common errors. Bladder cup too narrow or wide. Limb being assessed is unsupported. Insufficient rest before the assessment. Repeating the assessment too quickly. Cuff not wrapped tightly and evenly. Deflating the cuff too quickly. Deflating the cuff too slowly. Failure to use the same site for consistency of results. Limb being assessed is measured while above their heart level.
There was a few things that I've done wrong through the years, and that I think a lot of people do wrong. Taking the blood pressure, like once you've taken it and then you haven't heard properly, and then taking it too soon after they've done it the first time. A lot of nurses even do that still wrong. And it was interesting that they've had the bell the wrong side. Because I've always used it this side around. And then when I got this one, it didn't have a little hole on that side. So this one is actually really nice. You can hear with this one. So I've always struggled to hear. And then I thought, oh, it's maybe because I've had it the wrong way around. But then they've changed this one. It's like you can't, there's only one way to use it. So I'm not sure whether we have been doing it right or we have been doing it wrong. So we've done it the wrong way around. I don't know, but usually they have a little hole on the top here too. So it's, you know, and sometimes you really struggle to hear with stethoscopes. You need a good one to actually, and that's why doctors also keep their own stethoscopes, because they don't like sharing them. Of course, you don't want to stick something in your ear with somebody else's earwax on it. So it's another reason. But yeah, we will have a little practice afterwards, because I would like you to hear when it starts beating and when it stops beating, to just be able to identify that. So oh, we've seen that one. We go on to the respiratory system. This is a really good one too.
Respiratory system.
sound is bad on here. Then it's laughing.
To understand the process of breathing. In humans, the main organs responsible for respiration are present in the thoracic cavity. In the thorax region, the rib cage and a dome-shaped fibrous tissue, known as the diaphragm, are observed. Present within the rib cage are the pleural membranes, which enclose the lungs. The right lung is divided into 3 lobes: the right superior, right middle, and the right inferior lobe. The left lung is smaller and has only 2 lobes, the left superior and the left inferior lobe. Both the lungs are associated externally with small tubular bronchi, which unite and extend into the trachea. The trachea has incomplete C-shaped rings of cartilage, which prevent the tracheal wall from collapsing. The trachea leads into the pharynx, which is connected to the nostrils. As we breathe in air, the oxygen molecules enter the nostrils and travel downwards through the pharynx and trachea to finally reach the bronchi. From each bronchus, oxygen travels into the lungs. Within the lungs, the bronchus divides repeatedly to form bronchioles. Oxygen travels through these bronchioles and reaches the alveoli, each of which is surrounded by a network of capillaries. A section of one alveolus shows the presence of numerous alveolar chambers with pores. Blood containing RBCs is seen flowing through the capillaries. The oxygen molecules from the alveolus diffuse into the capillary and then get absorbed by the bluish-purple RBCs. This causes oxygenation of the RBCs, and a transition in their color from bluish-purple to red is observed. The blood moving into the alveolus contains RBCs and carbon dioxide molecules. These molecules are released into the alveolus. The carbon dioxide collects in the alveolar chamber. And then from the alveolus, it travels through the bronchioles into the bronchus, which finally reaches the trachea and is breathed out through the nostrils. So the process of breathing in air rich in oxygen is called inhalation. After the contraction of the muscular diaphragm, the lungs expand and the air rushes in, resulting in the inflation of the alveoli. During exhalation, the diaphragm moves up and the lungs contract. Thus, the alveoli deflate, causing the air to be forced out. This exhaled air is rich in carbon dioxide. This process of inhalation and exhalation is known as respiration, which is approximately 20 times per minute. Summary. In the thorax region, the rib cage and the diaphragm are observed, which play a vital role in respiration. Present within the rib cage are the pleural membranes, which enclose the lungs. The right lung consists of 3 lobes, while the left lung has only 2 lobes. Both the lungs are associated externally with bronchi, which unite and extend into the trachea. As we breathe, the oxygen molecules enter the nostrils and travel downwards through the pharynx and trachea to finally reach the bronchi. From each bronchus, oxygen travels into the lungs. Within the lungs, the bronchus divides repeatedly to form bronchioles. Oxygen travels through these bronchioles and reaches the alveoli, each of which is surrounded by a network of capillaries. As blood flows through the capillaries, the oxygen molecules from the alveolus diffuse into the capillary. This causes oxygenation of the RBCs. The carbon dioxide molecules are released into the alveolus. They are collected in the alveolar chamber, and then from the alveolus, it travels through the bronchioles. Into the bronchus, which finally reaches the trachea and is breathed out through the nostrils.
Okay, interesting. And I think the main thing through this unit that although we see the body system sitting also separate from each other, is to realize that the one system cannot work without the other one. You know, without the lungs putting the oxygen into the blood, the oxygen is not going to go to the heart for the heart to pump it through, you know, so it all works together and it very closely. So the next one is the skeleton system, skeletal system.
The musculoskeletal system consists of the muscular and skeletal systems, and together these give us the ability to move. The skeletal system provides support to the body and allows movement, as well as creating structures that protect soft tissue organs. For example, the rib cage protects the heart and lungs. The bones of the skeleton come together at places known as joints. There are different types of joints, each providing a different level of mobility. Sutures, for example, are non-movable joints between the bones of the skull, and they provide no mobility. Other joints, however, such as the ball and socket joints found in the hips and shoulders, provide lots of mobility, as these bones can rotate in multiple planes. Hinge joints, such as those in the knee and elbow, can bend in one plane but not rotate. And pivot joints, such as those found in the neck, allow rotation but in a limited plane. The bones that are movable joints are held together by a type of connective tissue known as ligaments. Other types of connective tissues involved in the skeletal system are tendons, responsible for attaching muscle to bone, and cartilage, which provides cushioning at many joints. The muscular system consists of 3 types of muscle tissue: smooth, cardiac, and skeletal muscle. The skeletal muscles are connected to bone by tendons, and they have several functions. They aid in the voluntary movement of the skeletal system. They provide joint stabilization, protect organs, and maintain posture. Cardiac muscles form the structure of the heart and allow the heart to contract and thus pump blood through the body. Smooth muscles line the vessels of the circulatory system and organs of the digestive system. So how exactly do skeletal muscles contract, resulting in the movement of bones? Well, skeletal muscle fibers contain thick filaments of myosin alternating with thin filaments of actin. A nerve signal to the muscle causes calcium ions to be released. These ions bind to a protein associated with the actin filaments, exposing the active sites. Part of the myosin structure can now interact with the active site of actin, thus pulling the actin filament positive, which results in the contraction of the muscle. As the muscle shortens, it pulls on the tendons, which pulls on the bone. This process occurs repeatedly until the nervous signal stops. Muscles can only pull on bone, they cannot push, and so in order for the bone to move back the other way, a different muscle must contract while the original muscle relaxes.
There you go. Did you know that? Okay, so just a quick little pause. This is one of your questions, and it's not in the book. So if you'd like to just write these ones down, it might be helpful. Yes. So it's skull, then it's the cervical vertebrae, then the thoracic vertebrae, then the lumbar ones, the sacrum and the coccyx. you probably don't need the numbers there. Then the wording is also just in your book, so it's just above the question is the spelling of the words. So it's cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacrum. Even if you just want to number it above your whether it's written down. So it's just helpful to just get it done, part of it. Okay, dokie. Move on. And a longer little thing to put all the USBs in. Got it?
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so we're moving on to the endocrine system.
The endocrine system is one of the two systems that are responsible for communication and integration between various body tissues, the other being the nervous system. Endocrine communication is achieved by means of chemical messengers called hormones. Hormones are produced in endocrine glands and secreted into the bloodstream to reach body tissues. A hormone can travel wherever the blood goes, but it can only affect cells that have receptors for it. These are called target cells. There are two major types of hormones. Steroid hormones derived from cholesterol and are lipid soluble, and non-steroid hormones derived from peptides or amino acids and are water soluble. Lipid soluble steroid hormones can cross the cell membrane to bind to their receptors inside the cells, either in the cytoplasm or nucleus. Steroid hormone receptors are typically transcription factors. Upon forming, the hormone receptor complex binds to specific DNA sequences to regulate gene expression, and thus mediating cellular response. On the other hand, water-soluble non-steroid hormones are unable to cross the lipid membrane and therefore must bind to receptors located on the surface of the cell. The binding triggers a cascade of events that leads to production of CAMP, a second messenger that is responsible for cellular response to hormone. It does so by changing enzyme activity or ion channel permeability. Major endocrine glands include the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, pineal gland, thyroid and parathyroid glands, thymus, adrenal gland, islets of the pancreas, and testes in men or ovaries in women. The endocrine system also includes hormone-secreting cells from other organs, such as kidneys and intestines. Except for the hypothalamus and the pituitary, different endocrine glands are involved in different, more or less independent processes. For example, the pancreas produces insulin and glucagon that keep blood sugar levels in check. The parathyroid glands produce hormones that regulate calcium and phosphorus. Thyroid hormones control metabolic rates, while the ovaries and testes are involved in reproductive functions. On the other hand, the hypothalamus and pituitary gland play a more central, integrative role. The hypothalamus is also part of the brain. It secretes several hormones called neurohormones, which control the production of other hormones by the pituitary. Thus, the hypothalamus links the nervous system to the endocrine system. The pituitary is known as the master gland because it controls the functions of many other endocrine glands. A major role of the endocrine system is to maintain the body's stable internal conditions, or homeostasis. such as blood sugar levels or serum calcium levels. To do this, it utilizes negative feedback mechanisms, which work very much like a thermostat. The heater is on when the temperature is low, off when it's high. For example, when blood glucose level is high, such as after a meal, glucose induces insulin release from the pancreas. Insulin helps body cells consume glucose, clearing it from the blood. Low blood glucose can no longer act on the pancreas, which now stops releasing insulin. Another example is the regulation of thyroid hormone levels, which are induced by a pituitary hormone called thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. TSH, in turn, is under control of thyrotropin releasing hormone, TRH, from the hypothalamus. When thyroid hormone levels are too high, they suppress the secretion of TSH and TRH, consequently inhibiting their own production. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, be sure to check out our new Patreon page. Patreon is a simple way for you to contribute to our production and get great rewards.
How are you all doing? Information overload? All right, the next one's the nervous system. The endocrine system is really important, and I think there's been, in recent years, a huge flare-up of autoimmune diseases, and a huge part of it is, the interference in our endocrine system, sort of the lack of, some essential nutrients and all sorts of different, and also overload of toxins that the body has to deal with all the time. So nervous system. This one was go straight to the internet.
Your nerves are literally everywhere around here. We'll start from the most important ones, which are going through your spine and your brain. This thick cluster of nerves is called the central nervous system, or CNS. It's responsible for everything you do, from breathing to tapping your finger on the side of your smartphone while waiting until I get to the topic already. When a signal gets to the CNS in the brain from any part of the body, it sends back a command to react according to the situation. Pinch yourself now. Yeah, please do it. Ow! The place you've just pinched has a lot of neurons, just like anywhere else. When you press the skin, they flared up and sent the information about pain to the brain, which reacted by sending back a message that it hurt. It all happened in less than a millisecond, but the signal traveled several feet there and back. Let's go to the spinal cord now and carry out a little experiment. On the count of one, I'll sever the connections between the neurons here, and you'll see what happens. Ready? 1. See, you've just become limp from your waist down and can't feel anything in your legs. It's because your CNS can't figure out where they are. Okay, restoring the connections now. Don't worry. This is why both your brain and spinal cord are naturally protected by bones, the skull, and the vertebrae. Inside the spinal column, there's also cerebrospinal fluid, a liquid substance that protects the nerves, helps better conduct signals, and gets rid of waste. Okay, now let's take a closer look at all the rest of the nerves, starting with the ones at the tips of your fingers. Everything that's not the CNS is called peripheral nervous system, or PNS. Will you kindly wave your hand now? Thanks. You've been able to do that because your brain consciously sent several million signals to the peripheral nerves in your shoulder, forearm, wrist, and hand. Together, they made a common effort to lift your arm, fix it in a certain position, and wave the hand from side to side. And responsible for this effort is your voluntary or somatic nervous system. Your eyebrows going up at this fact are also controlled by the same nerves. Did you count how many breaths you took while listening to my ramblings? You beat your heart had made. You shouldn't have. These things are regulated by your vegetative or involuntary nervous system. Your CNS sends signals to the periphery and tells your heart to beat, your respiratory system to let the air in and out, and even your bowels to digest the food you eat. Now, blow all the air out of your lungs and hold your breath for as long as you can. Okay, this will take some time. So fast forward to the point where you start wanting to breathe in. Letting the air out and holding your breath are your conscious actions. So it's you who tells your brain to send signals to the breathing organs. But when you start lacking oxygen, it's already your brain that tells you to stop fooling around. Oh, I see you're becoming blue in the face. Please inhale already. And now I'll do something you'll have to forgive me for. Ow! Sorry, you dropped the phone because I sent a little shock through it. The point is, you subconsciously let your phone go as soon as you felt the pain. When I asked you to pinch yourself, you activated your voluntary nervous system. So you expected the pain and could continue pinching if you wanted to. This shock came unexpectedly though. So your involuntary nervous system jolted in and made you move away from the threat ASAP. That said, your self-preservation instinct is something that's regulated by your nerves as well. Your body will try to save itself from harm even without your consent. Hey, what's that itch? You need to scratch it now. Ugh, thanks. Itching appears when there's something on or under your skin that doesn't belong there, like an insect or a bite it left. Nerves at the site flare up like beacons, and your brain sends signals to that spot. But when you scratch the itch, you feel two opposite things at once. Consciously, you experience relief because it's not itching anymore. On the subconscious level, though, your brain perceives scratching as pain and shifts your attention from the itch to the scratch instead. Basically, by scratching, you trick your brain into believing there are more important things to do than paying attention to the itch. Hey, is it me or is it a bit too hot here? Yeah, I see droplets of sweat on your forehead. When the outside temperature rises, your CNN reacts to the change. Billions of signals flash through your entire body. Sweat glands receive them in the blink of an eye and start working furiously. Sweat appears on your skin, cooling it down. I recommend going to the AC and turning it higher a bit, thank you. Hey, I said a bit, not all the way up. Ah, great, now you're shivering. Your brain is confused, but is still working fast, reacting to the change of circumstances. Once again, it sends billions of signals to all the neurons in your muscles, telling them to start contracting as quickly as they can. By doing so, they create friction, and friction generates heat. Your heart starts beating faster too, by the way, pumping blood to your limbs to keep them from freezing. All this also makes you think sliding that counter up a notch is a good idea. On the topic of thinking, neurons are responsible for that too. For example, this is your first time watching this video. You can't possibly know what I'm going to do or say next. Maybe I'll do a barrel roll, or just end the whole video abruptly. Your brain is only now creating the neural connections necessary for you to remember what's coming up next. This is why you're still bearing with me. You want to know. But as soon as you've watched it until the end, the interest is gone, no matter how fascinating I am. Your CNS has created enough connections between the neurons, and if you start over, they will tell you what to expect. Still, the pathways are very basic. A simple example. What did I say exactly 3 minutes and 5 seconds into the video? You can't remember because your neural connections aren't strong enough yet to give such details. But the more times you watch, the stronger and more numerous they become, and after a number of attempts, you'll be able to repeat the whole text word for word. The same happens when you learn some new skill, like roller skating. At first, you can't move even a single foot. Your brain encounters an unusual task and is all ablaze with signals it's sending every which way. You fall, but then you stand up and try once more. This time, several million neurons are already connected, and your CNS doesn't waste time creating new links. You fall again, and again, and again. But every time you rise and repeat, your brain gets more and more adapted, until finally, on your 5th, 10th, or 50th attempt, you skate forward. The brain captures the moment you stop falling and creates strong neural connections to prevent you from repeating your previous mistakes. And soon enough, with more practice and links in your CNS, you'll be skating like a pro, wondering how you could be so clumsy before. Yet, the best thing about these connections is that they never completely go away. Even if you learned skating as a kid and then didn't put on the skates for 10 years, it'll take you just a couple of minutes to recall how it's done. So, hey, if you're afraid to take that dusty guitar hanging on the wall for years, don't be. Go strum the strings. It'll all come back to you in a jiffy. Maybe not the calluses.
That was a good little video.
Hey,
I like that video there where you sit down and before you watch it, before you retain.
yeah, it's incredible. Also, it's like there's so many things that relates to that muscle memory. When you've been like, if you've been traumatized, your body remembers it. And if you walk into a room again, or you walk into a situation that there's similar things, then what the
Smells,
trauma,
right?
yeah, it can trigger you, as well as the memory that if you've heard something fall in the middle of the night, and then you go and investigate, and next time that happened, you know exactly, it's like a split second, and you remember, it's the picture that just fell off the wall, or something that yeah. So it's incredible how our bodies is. I just think it's so awesome.
Also,
It's-
too, with what they were saying, like what you just said, if you constantly talk about something, an accident that happened 20 years ago, you're actually there and you're actually reliving the accident again. Doesn't matter whether it's happening there or it's happening here.
Yeah, so somewhere along the line, we have to sort of say that's,
Let
we
it go.
dealt with it, but the important principle, and we will be doing that when we do the DIS 002, the what is it called? Behaviors of concern, or dealing with behaviors in that unit, and it's similar to the unit with dementia. We'll be doing something when trauma, like the trauma cycle, and it's important that when some people don't want to deal with trauma, because when they think about it, it's like they're in the trauma, and then they bail out before they've gone through. And the important principle with dealing with trauma is that you go through the cycle. So you allow yourself to get scared, realize that you're not there anymore, tell yourself, this is not real, I'm just going through this. And then once you've gone through that, and you've actually then trained your brain, or trained your neuro transmitters that you're not in the trauma, then you can overcome it. So you have to go through it and go out the other side. It's it's like when we snap ourselves out of a bad dream, and instead of and then you fall asleep and you go back to the bad dream, or when you go back to the bad dream, you say to yourself in your dream, this is just a dream, or and then suddenly it sort of eases away. So it's it's very fascinating how the whole body has got a memory, and and how it sort of works.
That's what's happened. That's what's happened with us all through our lives and generation. Everything that's happened to like my granddad when he was a kid, is in him. You know what I mean? It just gets passed down through generations.
Yeah.
Everything happened to him happens to me, and everything happens to me happens to my child, and vice versa. We keep on going with that all through.
Yeah, there is chemicals that can alter our DNA, and it is true that there is, that inherent maybe behavior sometimes that we are, but a lot more of it is learned. So a lot more is learned than what it's actually part of your DNA or part of your neurotransmitter. So it's more about hearing them tell you the stories, or the stories are passed on, than what it is actually that it's so
listen to your elders, tell them about.
Yeah, because there is the danger that people can say, oh, I'm an addict because my mother was an addict, or you know what I'm saying. So and some addicts use that as an excuse, because they say, oh, it's something that I can't help it, it's been a part of my family, and that type of thing. At the same time, it's that cycle that you have to go through, deal with it and put it aside and say, okay, maybe my memory in my body or my neurotransmitters have got some memory, but I can go through this trauma and I can deal with it and I can decide. I still have the power. So there's a constant renewing, and we will see that when we talk about the integumentary system. There's a constant renewing of your cells, and it happens everywhere in your body. So howsoever long, your body recreates itself constantly. It's not stagnant. It's, your skin, the dead skin falls away and new skin comes up, and it's constant renewal. And the same with our brains, with our cells. The one thing that cannot heal itself is our neurotransmitters, our part of our, where is the system? Yeah, the nerves, yeah. The nerves can't renew itself. It can't, no, it can't heal itself. But it's magic because another nerve can take over the function. So even though that nerve may not work anymore, another nerve can take on the function.
Oh, okay, because when you get, like, when you have a head injury or something, you lose certain senses, but then there's other senses that take over those senses. Like you might lose your
It heightened, not actually taken over completely, but it heightens. You can get heightened senses, like if you become blind, you can focus more on your hearing. It's not like your hearing is super or different to anyone else's hearing. It's just that you train your brain to identify things through hearing, and your hearing becomes more sensitive.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
or something else like hearing, or your touch becomes more sensitive because you're not using this, and then that's not being used. So
your body adapts and
Yeah.
and learn how to deal with things. So that's all part of, obviously starting in our brain, and then us being the center of, and if our brain doesn't work, our body dies. Bottom line is, like, you become brain dead, and that's that. Okay, the integumentary system, and we might, after this one, we will have a break. Because I know these videos can, like, it's a lot of information.
I like watching videos, let alone like talking about it.
Yeah. Look, I cannot explain it the way they do, and I cannot draw the pictures the way they do. So that's why I tap onto this. I think it's brilliant. We're lucky to have these things these days, aren't we?
All these tentacles.
Yeah, I love tentacles too.
Between you and the rest of the world lies an interface that makes up 16% of the physical weight. This is your skin, the largest organ in your body. Laid out flat, it would cover close to 1.7 square meters of ground. Its purpose may seem obvious, to keep our insides in. But a look beyond the surface reveals that it plays a surprising number of roles in our lives. First, the basics. Skin is the foundation of the integumentary system, which also incorporates your hair, nails, and specialized glands and nerves. Made up of 3 layers, the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis, skin's thickness varies from 0.5 millimeters at its thinnest and up to 4 millimeters at its thickest. It also carries out 3 key functions: protecting, regulating, and sensing the world beyond its limits. On a daily basis, its huge surface processes hundreds, if not thousands, of physical sensations, relying mostly on large pressure-sensitive skin components called Merkel cells. In your fingertips alone, there are 750 Merkel cells per each square centimeter of skin, coupled with over 2,500 receptors that give you your sense of touch. This surface is also the body's first major line of defense. Without it, you'd be a soggy mass of tissue and fluids, fatally exposed to the elements. Skin effectively seals off your insides and also absorbs pressure and shock with flexible collagen that makes up most of its dermal layer. The epidermis is made up mainly of skin cells called keratinocytes that are completely replaced every 4 weeks. As new cells form at the base of the epidermis, older ones are pushed up. When these cells move upwards, they're filled with a hardened protein called keratin. Once they reach the surface, they form a tightly overlapping waterproof layer that's difficult for invading microbes to breach. Any harmful microbes that make it into the epidermis will encounter Langerhans cells. This group of protective skin cells detects invaders and communicates their presence to resident immune system T cells, which react by launching an immune response. A crucial feature of this immune defense is the several thousand species of microorganisms that inhabit the planes, folds, and crevices of your skin. These microbes, which include bacteria and fungi, thrive in the sebum, an oily substance that's secreted onto the skin's surface by sebaceous glands nestled inside the dermis. These skin microbes keep the immune system in a state of constant surveillance, ensuring that it's ready to react if the body really is at risk. Beyond this protective role, your skin is also a sensory organ that helps regulate your body's temperature, two roles that are closely interlinked. Nerves detect whether your skin is warm or cold and communicate that information to your brain. In return, the brain instructs localized blood vessels to either expand if the body is too warm, releasing heat from the blood through the skin, or to constrict if the body is cold, which retains heat. At any given time, up to 25% of the body's blood is circulating through the dermis, making this process extremely efficient. Under warm conditions, the skin's sweat glands will secrete sweat via ducts onto the surface, transferring heat out of the body. Hair can also be stimulated to conserve or release body warmth. The average human has 5 million hair follicles embedded everywhere on the body, except the palms of your hands and soles of your feet. 90 to 150,000 of those are on your scalp, where they help shield the large surface area of your head from physical damage and sunburn. When you're cold, tiny muscles called erector pili cause hair to stand upright across the body. That's the phenomenon known as goosebumps, and it traps body heat close to your skin. Skin's vast surface isn't just a shield. It also enables us to interact and connect with the world. Its multifunctional layer cools us down and keeps us warm. The integumentary system may be many things, but it's certainly more than skin deep. Now that we've covered your outer shell, want to get to know your insides a little better? Check out this playlist with some of our favorite animations on the human body. And if you want to help us make more videos like these, please consider supporting our nonprofit mission by visiting patreon.com/TEDEd.
Okay. Let's have a break. So the special senses, the 5 special senses. Goes from loud to it's too loud.
You hear the gentle
Alright.
laugh of waves, the distant cawing of a seagull, but then an annoying whine interrupts the peace, getting closer and closer and closer until, whack, you dispatch the offending mosquito and calm is restored. How did you detect that noise from afar and target its maker with such precision? The ability to recognize sounds and identify their location is possible thanks to the auditory system. That's comprised of 2 main parts, the ear and the brain. The ear's task is to convert sound energy into neural signals. The brain's is to receive and process the information those signals contain. To understand how that works, we can follow a sound on its journey into the ear. The source of a sound creates vibrations that travel as waves of pressure through particles in air, liquids, or solids. But our inner ear, called the cochlea, is actually filled with saltwater-like fluids. So the first problem to solve is how to convert those sound waves, wherever they're coming from, into waves in the fluid. The solution is the eardrum, or tympanic membrane, and the tiny bones of the middle ear. Those convert the large movements of the eardrum into pressure waves in the fluid of the cochlea. When sound enters the ear canal, it hits the eardrum and makes it vibrate like the head of a drum. The vibrating eardrum jerks a bone called the hammer, which hits the anvil and moves the third bone called the stapes. Its motion pushes the fluid within the long chambers of the cochlea. Once there, the sound vibrations have finally been converted into vibrations of a fluid, and they travel like a wave from one end of the cochlea to the other. A surface called the basilar membrane runs the length of the cochlea. It's lined with hair cells that have specialized components called stereocilia, which move with the vibrations of the cochlear fluid and the basilar membrane. This movement triggers a signal that travels through the hair cell into the auditory nerve, then onward to the brain, which interprets it as a specific sound. When a sound makes the basilar membrane vibrate, not every hair cell moves, only selected ones, depending on the frequency of the sound. This comes down to some fine engineering. At one end, the basilar membrane is stiff, vibrating only in response to short wavelength, high frequency sounds. The other is more flexible, vibrating only in the presence of longer wavelength, low frequency sounds. So the noises made by the seagull and mosquito vibrate different locations on the basilar membrane, like playing different keys on a piano. But that's not all that's going on. The brain still has another important task to fulfill, identifying where a sound is coming from. For that, it compares the sounds coming into the two ears to locate the source in space. A sound from directly in front of you will reach both your ears at the same time. You'll also hear it at the same intensity in each ear. However, a low frequency sound coming from one side will reach the near ear microseconds before the far one. And high frequency sounds will sound more intense to the near ear because they're blocked from the far ear by your head. These strands of information reach special parts of the brainstem that analyze time and intensity differences between your ears. They send the results of their analysis up to the auditory cortex. Now the brain has all the information it needs, the patterns of activity that tell us what the sound is, and information about where it is in space. Not everyone has normal hearing. Hearing loss is the third most common chronic disease in the world. Exposure to loud noises and some drugs can kill hair cells, preventing signals from traveling from the ear to the brain. Diseases like osteosclerosis freeze the tiny bones in the ear so they no longer vibrate. And with tinnitus, the brain does strange things to make us think there's a sound when there isn't one. But when it does work, our hearing is an incredible, elegant system. Our ears enclose a fine-tuned piece of biological machinery that converts the cacophony of vibrations in the air around us into precisely tuned electrical impulses that distinguish claps, taps, sighs, and flies. Dive deeper into the complex world of your senses with this playlist.
Fascinating. Hi.
What was the 5 things? Sight, smell, and touch. What was that?
Sight, hearing, smelling, and touch.
Sight, smell, touch, hearing.
Sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch.
You might have heard that light is a kind of wave, and that the color of an object is related to the frequency of light waves it reflects. High frequency light waves look violet, low frequency light waves look red, and in between frequencies like yellow, green, orange, and so on. You might call this idea physical color, because it says that color is a physical property of light itself. It's not dependent on human perception. And while this isn't wrong, it isn't quite the whole story either. For instance, you might have seen this picture before. As you can see, the region where the red and green lights overlap is yellow, When you think about it, this is pretty weird. Because light is a wave, two different frequencies shouldn't interact with each other at all. They should just coexist, like singers singing in harmony. So in this yellow-looking region, two different kinds of light waves are present. One with a red frequency and one with a green frequency. There's no yellow light present at all. So how come this region, where the red and green lights mix, looks yellow to us? To understand this, you have to understand a little bit about biology, in particular about how humans see color. Light perception happens in a paper-thin layer of cells called the retina that covers the back of your eyeball. In the retina, there are two different types of light-detecting cells, rods and cones. The rods are used for seeing in low light conditions, and there's only one kind of those. The cones, however, are a different story. There are three kinds of cone cells that roughly correspond to the colors red, green, and blue. When you see a color, each cone sends its own distinct signal to your brain. For example, suppose that yellow light, that is real yellow light with a yellow frequency, is shining on your eye. You don't have a cone specifically for detecting yellow, but yellow is kind of close to green and also kind of close to red. So both the red and green cones get activated and each sends a signal to your brain saying so. Of course, there's another way to activate the red cones and the green cones simultaneously, if both red light and green light are present at the same time. The point is, your brain receives the same signal regardless of whether you see light that has the yellow frequency or light that is a mixture of the green and red frequencies. That's why, for light, red plus green equals yellow. And how come you can't detect colors when it's dark? Well, the rod cells in your retina take over in low light conditions. You only have one kind of rod cell, and so there's only one type of signal that can get sent to your brain, light or no light. Having only one kind of light detector doesn't leave any room for seeing color. There are infinitely many different physical colors, but because we only have three kinds of cones, the brain can be tricked into thinking it's seeing any color by carefully adding together the right combination of just three colors, red, green, and blue. This property of human vision is really useful in the real world. For example, TV manufacturing. Instead of having to put infinitely many colors in your TV set to simulate the real world, TV manufacturers only have to put three, red, green, and blue, which is lucky for them, really.
Okay, I haven't got all the senses there, but I've got the few, just the two main ones. Carry on to the digestive system.
Across the whole planet, humans eat on average between 1 and 2.7 kilograms of food a day. That's over 365 kilograms a year per person, and more than 28,800 kilograms over the course of a lifetime. And every last scrap makes its way through the digestive system. Comprised of 10 organs, covering 9 meters, and containing over 20 specialized cell types, this is one of the most diverse and complicated systems in the human body. Its parts continuously work in unison to fulfill a singular task, transforming the raw materials of your food into the nutrients and energy that keep you alive. Spanning the entire length of your torso, the digestive system has 4 main components. First, there's the gastrointestinal tract, a twisting channel that transports your food and has an internal surface area of between 30 and 40 square meters, enough to cover half a badminton court. Second, there's the pancreas, gallbladder, and liver, a trio of organs that break down food using an array of special juices. Third, the body's enzymes, hormones, nerves, and blood all work together to break down food, modulate the digestive process, and deliver its final products. Finally, there's the mesentery, a large stretch of tissue that supports and positions all your digestive organs in the abdomen, enabling them to do their jobs. The digestive process begins before food even hits your tongue. Anticipating a tasty morsel, glands in your mouth start to pump out saliva. We produce about 1.5 liters of this liquid each day. Once inside your mouth, Chewing combines with the sloshing saliva to turn food into a moist lump called the bolus. Enzymes present in the saliva break down any starch. Then your food finds itself at the rim of a 25-centimeter long tube called the esophagus, down which it must plunge to reach the stomach. Nerves in the surrounding esophageal tissue sense the bolus's presence and trigger peristalsis, a series of defined muscular contractions. That propels the food into the stomach, where it's left at the mercy of the muscular stomach walls, which pound the bolus, breaking it into chunks. Hormones secreted by cells in the lining trigger the release of acids and enzyme-rich juices from the stomach wall that start to dissolve the food and break down its proteins. These hormones also alert the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder to produce digestive juices and transfer bile, a yellowish-green liquid that digests fat, in preparation for the next stage. After 3 hours inside the stomach, the once shapely bolus is now a frothy liquid called chyme, and it's ready to move into the small intestine. The liver sends bile to the gallbladder, which secretes it into the first portion of the small intestine, called the duodenum. Here, it dissolves the fats floating in the slurry of chyme so they can be easily digested by the pancreatic and intestinal juices that have leached onto the scene. These enzyme-rich juices break the fat molecules down into fatty acids and glycerol for easier absorption into the body. The enzymes also carry out the final deconstruction of proteins into amino acids and carbohydrates into glucose. This happens in the small intestine's lower regions, the jejunum and ileum, which are coated in millions of tiny projections called villi. These create a huge surface area to maximize molecule absorption and transference into the bloodstream. The blood takes them on the final leg of their journey to feed the body's organs and tissues. But it's not over quite yet. Leftover fiber, water, and dead cells sloughed off during digestion make it into the large intestine, also known as the colon. The body drains out most of the remaining fluid through the intestinal wall. What's left is a soft mass called stool. The colon squeezes this byproduct into a pouch called the rectum, where nerves sense it expanding and tell the body when it's time to expel the waste. The byproducts of digestion exit through the anus, and the food's long journey, typically lasting between 30 and 40 hours, is finally complete. TED-Ed is a nonprofit. If you value our work, please consider supporting it on patreon.com.
We eat too often. Yeah, so you can eat once every 2 days. Maybe we'll start losing weight if we do that. Oh, I'm struggling. Urinary system. Fascinating too.
The urinary or excretory system is another system by which the body rids itself of unwanted toxins or waste. Basically, the urinary system's main purpose is to maintain the body's homeostasis. In other words, its main function is to maintain the body's acid-base balance. It's important to know the human organism was meant to stay healthy, and systems such as the urinary, digestive, skin, and other vital organ systems were created for that purpose. They are designed to keep the body healthy and able to withstand diseases. But if the load of toxins and or waste is greater than what these systems can handle, guess what happens? You can learn more about this by watching CTE Skills Introduction to the Cell and see how disease is created. In this introductory video on the urinary system, however, we'll just be taking a look at the purpose of the urinary system, the structures that make it up, the functions of each, and how they work together to maintain balance in the body. The urinary system, much like the integumentary system, doesn't have many parts, but they are truly essential to the survival of the human organism. Let's take a look at the basic anatomical structures of the urinary system. They are 2 kidneys, 2 ureters, 1 bladder, one urethra, and the urethra meatus. Now the two kidneys are bean-shaped in appearance. They are located on either side of the vertebral column behind the upper part of the abdominal cavity. The kidneys are protected by the ribs and a heavy cushion of fat called the adipose capsule. They are literally suspended in the body, meaning unattached to any other major organ. They pretty much stay up by themselves. And for this reason, kidney punching in boxing is illegal. Each kidney is divided into two main sections, the cortex and the medulla. The cortex is the outer section of the kidney. It contains the majority of nephrons. Nephrons are microscopic filtering units. These filtering units are composed of the following structures: a glomerulus, a Bowman's capsule, a proximal convoluted tubule, and a distal convoluted tubule, and a collecting duct. Together, these structures purify the blood by removing excess water, salt, sugar, metabolic products, and other substances the body needs to purge in order to maintain the pH acid-base balance and thus the homeostasis of the body. Now the medulla is the intersection of the kidney. It contains most of the collecting tubules, which carry the urine from the nephrons through the kidney to the ureters. The ureters are two muscular tubes, approximately 10 to 12 inches long, and extending from the renal pelvis of each kidney to the bladder. Now the bladder is a hollow sac, much like the stomach, lined by a series of folds called ruga. The purpose of these folds is to allow the bladder to expand as urine is collected. The bladder typically holds up to 1 cup of urine, and sometimes more, until the urge to void or urinate is turned on. Leading from the bladder is the urethra tube. Its job is to carry the urine from the bladder to the outside of the body. The last structure in the urinary pathway of purging toxins from the body is the external opening to the urethra. This is called the urethra meatus. Now here's a very important note to make about the urethra and the sexes. In females, the urethra is only about 1.5 inches long, and it is separate from the reproductive system. While in the males, the urethra is approximately 8 inches long, and before the urine exits, it goes through the prostate gland. The urethra in the male is used by two body systems, the urinary and the reproductive. Only urine passes through the urethra in the urinary system, but in the reproductive system, only semen passes through. Urine and semen will never pass at the same time through the male's urethra. So what exactly is urine? Urine is the waste product that the urinary system is responsible for eliminating from the body. It's 95% water, and the other 5% is made up of urea, uric acid, creatine, mineral salts, various pigments, and sugar. Excess sugar found in the urine can be indicative of diabetes. In a day's work, the kidney can filter up to 150 quarts of liquid, resulting in about 1.5 to 2 quarts of urine. That's if you're drinking the proper amount of water. Last but not least, each of the kidneys have the adrenal glands attached to the upper portion. These glands have very important functions that will be explained in the endocrine system. Now, before we finish, let's go over it one more time. The basic purpose for this system is to cleanse the blood. It filters out toxins such as excess sugars and salts, as well as other substances. The main structures or anatomical parts are 2 kidneys, 2 ureters, 1 bladder, 1 urethra, and the urethra meatus. Each kidney is divided into the cortex and medulla. Inside the cortex of both kidneys are thousands of microscopic filtering units called nephrons. And remember, it's important to drink lots of water in order for the kidneys and the urinary system to continue to function properly. Thanks for watching. For more videos on the urinary system, visit cteskills.com.
Wow. How you all doing? Good. We
Another
keep
break?
going. Okay.
Another break?
You want another break? It is a lot of information.
The mind
This
does,
is-
it'll be right.
I've watched these probably about, I don't know, 2 years now in a row. Every second month or so I watch this. And I still am overwhelmed, and I still hear new things that I've missed in previous times. So it's a lot of information. And if you think about it, if you're a doctor or RN, you're studying for RNs, or if you study to be a doctor, you go, you can specialize in one area and just learn for 2 or 3 years, just one body system and the function of that and the diseases attached to that. Okay, the next one is the reproductive systems.
Welcome to the reproductive system. So let's start by asking, what is the reproductive system? It's basically a system in our bodies that includes our sex organs and certain parts of our brain. You can see the sex organs here on the male and here in 2 places on the female. So this system within our bodies allows us to reproduce. It allows us to make babies. And to make babies, what we're doing is combining genetic material from the biological mother's egg and the biological father's sperm to make our offspring. And we typically do this via sexual intercourse. So let's first take a brief look at a couple of the most important sex organs that males and females have in their reproductive systems. So the males have the testes, and these are the most important structures, sort of the structures that everything else is built around in a male. And that's because the testes actually produce his contribution to a baby. They make these small mobile cells that carry his genetic material into a female to fuse with her genetic material to cause a pregnancy. And these small mobile cells are his sperm. Another important male organ is the penis. And the penis is used to deliver his sperm inside the female mate to increase the chance that it meets her egg. So those are really the major male organs. Now on the female side, one of her major organs is the ovary. And she has 2, just like how males have 2 testes. And in fact, the ovaries and testes are homologous. They came from the same precursor in development. Now the ovary is responsible for producing the female's genetic contribution to a baby. That is the egg. The ovaries, though, are a lot different to the testes in that the testes are constantly producing lots and lots of sperm to the tune of millions per day, whereas the ovaries only release 1 egg per month. So the next really important female organ is called the uterus. And the uterus is basically a really thick muscular organ that's capable of stretching out, and it's actually where the baby is developing during pregnancy until birth. The next really important female structures are the breasts. And the breasts are important because they produce milk during pregnancy and afterwards via a process called lactation. And lactation happens due to a series of hormones that generally get released around pregnancy. So this breast milk that gets produced can feed and nourish the growing baby. And it actually plays a role in creating a stronger immune system for the baby. So we've seen some of the major structures of both male and female reproductive systems. But is that all the reproductive systems are? Actually, no. Besides producing sperm and egg, the reproductive systems produce chemicals whose signals have a really strong influence over activities in our bodies. We call these chemicals hormones, and because they come from our reproductive systems, we refer to them as our sex hormones. For example, the male's major sex hormone, testosterone, which is actually produced in the testes, is responsible for many masculine traits, such as body hair, the deepening of your voice, muscle growth, and there's possibly even a link to levels of aggression in males. On the female side of things, the ovary is the primary producer of some major female hormones like estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen and progesterone play a major role in the timing of egg release from the ovaries. Estrogen is also responsible for the development of a lot of feminine traits, for example, breast development. So there's the making of the sperm and the egg, there's the production of the major sex hormones. What else does a reproductive system do? Well, it does one more really important thing, and that's coordinate the meeting of the sperm and the egg. And it does that via the male's penis and the female's vagina. These two organs are used to ensure that the sperm and the egg meet each other. So the penis actually deposits sperm within the vagina so that sperm has a better chance of reaching and fertilizing the egg released inside her reproductive tract. So you might be thinking, does the reproductive system do all this stuff on its own? I mean, what tells it what to do? And that's a good question. The reproductive system is actually controlled by the brain. There's an area in the brain called the hypothalamus that sits just about there on the inside of the brain, just about in the middle. And the hypothalamus actually releases a hormone called gonadotropin releasing hormone, or GnRH. GnRH affects another part of the brain called the anterior pituitary, which sits right about there, just under the hypothalamus. And the anterior pituitary, in response to GnRH, releases two hormones, luteinizing hormone, or LH, and follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH. And it's the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone that primarily affects the male and female sex organs. So the male's testes and the female's ovaries to control their functions. Finally, a word on pregnancy, as pregnancy is a huge part of reproduction and certainly the most long-lasting part. So pregnancy results when a sperm successfully fertilizes an egg to create a zygote. A zygote is a first cell in a new organism that has genetic material from both mom and dad. And that genetic material has come from the sperm and the egg that have fused. The zygote goes through a series of developments and eventually implants itself within the inner wall of a woman's uterus to grow. So that's in here. Remember that thick muscular organ we talked about? The third step is what we'll really broadly call gestation. Gestation is basically the development of the fetus into a baby. So the development of all the fetus's organ systems, including their brain, spinal cord, lungs, cardiovascular system, their reproductive system, all the systems in their body. Gestation readies the developing infant to be born, and it takes about 9 months. When the baby's ready to come out of the uterus and into the world, a number of hormonal changes take place in the mother's body. This signals her to start getting ready to push the baby out of her body. In other words, give birth to the baby. She then goes through a process called labor, also known as parturition, to give birth to the baby. After the baby is born, the last step is to give him or her a name.
Don't forget to give them a name. The lymphatic system.
Let's talk about the cardiovascular system. Here's a cartoon of it, and we have our heart, which is the pump, which pumps blood through the blood vessels round and round through the body. And the purpose of this whole system is to get blood out here to the capillary beds. So here's a capillary bed, and that's where the blood vessels become very skinny and they divide. And because they're so skinny, they have a lot more surface area. And that increased surface area allows the blood to exchange its oxygen and nutrients with these cells here that I'm drawing, which need those things. So the blood gives its oxygen to these cells, and by the time it gets through the capillary bed, it's lost its own oxygen. So now it's blue, and that blood goes back to the heart. Now I haven't drawn it, but here also the blood goes through the lungs and gets new oxygen so that when it goes around again, it has oxygen. So this is a closed loop with blood going round and round and round. But it has a problem, which is that the heart needs to pump quite strong for blood to go around fast enough and feed all the cells in your body. And what that means is that the
pressure that the heart exerts is very high. So there's high pressure in the heart, there's high pressure throughout these blood vessels. And what that actually does is it forces some fluid out of your blood vessels, and especially out of these capillaries here. It forces fluid out, and that fluid is not exactly blood, because, for example, the red blood cells, which are in your blood, are too big to squeeze out. But the sort of more liquidy part of your blood, which is like plasma, that does get squeezed out. And so that's what ends up here. And that fluid mixes in with the cells, which are outside of the capillaries, and it accumulates. Now, this is a problem, because if we let this go on, we would lose pretty much all of the fluid in the blood, and we would get a buildup of fluid out here, and that would be an unsustainable situation. So that's where your lymphatic system comes in. This is the problem that it addresses. So your lymphatic system is actually another plumbing system, which I'm going to try to draw here. So it's another plumbing system. It has these vessels which kind of start in the middle of nowhere, and they collect this fluid. The fluid goes in, they collect it, and they bring it back into circulation. So they bring it back into the blood. And that way, it goes back in, and the blood can continue to circulate, and we now do have a sustainable situation. So these vessels here we call lymphatic vessels. And if you'll notice, they're a little bit different from blood vessels because they don't form a closed loop. The lymph, as this stuff is called, lymph, so that's the fluid that gets forced out of your blood. The lymph goes in here and it gets dumped out into the blood vessels there. It doesn't go back around to the start. So that's kind of the basic explanation for why we need these lymphatic vessels. But to give it a little bit more depth, let's take one of these capillaries and we're going to zoom in and we're going to draw it a little bit rotated here. Hope that doesn't throw you off. These are the endothelial cells lining that capillary. And we're going to study exactly how fluid gets forced out. So as we move along this capillary, the blood is going to become deoxygenated. And so I'm drawing the changing colors, even though, in reality, it's not the endothelial cells that are changing colors, but having these colors will help orient, I think. And so flowing through this capillary, you have little red blood cells, which I'll try to draw as little discs there. You have little red blood cells, and of course you have lots of water, a lot of water. And finally, you also have a bunch of little proteins. Some of the proteins are actually bigger than others, so we'll draw them in varying sizes. But all this stuff is present in the blood, and because of the high pressure, it gets squeezed out. So the first question is exactly where and how does it get squeezed out? And the answer is it gets through between the cells. The cells are not quite held together tightly enough to prevent stuff from getting out. But they are held tightly enough to prevent the bigger things from getting out. So the red blood cells and the bigger proteins won't get out. But what will get out is some of the fluid, some of the water, and some of the smaller proteins, which we'll draw like this. So actually, by the time the blood gets down to the latter part of the capillary, it's lost some of these smaller proteins and some of this fluid. And so let's show that by actually erasing some of it. And so the concentration of bigger proteins is higher. And you could even say that the concentration of red blood cells is a little higher. So we have a higher concentration of solutes in this part of the capillary than we had over there. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because there's actually a subtlety, a complication here, which is that although lymph, or what will soon be lymph, is being forced out of the capillary over here, actually some fluid comes back into the blood vessel over here. And to understand that, you need to know that the concentration of solutes is higher here, which leads to a higher osmotic pressure pulling fluid back in. And to understand that, you also need to know that the pressure, the regular hydrostatic pressure, is lower in the latter part of the capillary compared to the earlier part. So the pressure goes down. And the pressure what was pushing the lymph out of the blood vessel over here. So now we have less pushing out and more pulling back in. The stuff that's pulling back in is the osmotic pressure caused by the increased concentration. So here, some of the fluid and some of the smaller proteins might get pulled back in. So now you might be confused because I said that fluid is getting pushed out, is leaking out of the blood vessels. And here I'm saying that it's leaking out, but then coming back in. But the fact is that more goes out than comes back in. And so let's draw these arrows a little bigger. So more goes out than comes back in. And so net results of the blood traveling through this capillary is that you end up with lymph squeezed out. So now you know a little more detail about how and why we end up with lymph. But you might be asking yourself, why don't these cells just tighten up their connections there to prevent stuff from getting out? But the answer is you have to remember that we have other cells around here which want to be fed. They want to get glucose and other such things from the blood. And so it's important that little glucose molecules and small proteins like hormones can get out into the space near these cells so that we can interact with them. So basically, if these endothelial cells in the capillaries were tightly connected together, then all these cells in your body would kind of be sealed off. And you might be wondering, well, are these gaps also necessary so that oxygen can get to the cells? And actually, oxygen is different. It's very small. It's just 2 atoms, 1 molecule. So oxygen can just go right through the cells. It can just travel right through walls and get where it needs to. So hopefully this gives you a better idea of how lymph is kind of formed from capillaries, how a bunch is squeezed out and only some of it gets back in. So finally, I just wanted to draw a pretty ugly human being and make the point that you pretty much have capillaries all over your body. They're feeding all your muscles, all your different tissues. And for that reason, you need lymph vessels to take lymph away from pretty much all of your body. So you have lymph vessels coming out of your legs, coming out of your arms, and so on. And in a sense, they have a similar structure to blood vessels, which is that they start very small, and many of them come together and join up into a bigger lymph vessel, and that lymph vessel joins with another bigger lymph vessel, and so on. And so it's kind of like they start out as capillaries, and then they merge together and get bigger and bigger. But of course, they have the big difference from blood vessels, which is that they're not a closed loop. Ultimately, when they've consolidated into big lymphatic vessels, they just dump their contents back into blood circulation.
Incredible, hey, how the body works. It's one of our drainage systems as well, the lymphatic system. So we're only getting to chapter 1.2. Sorry, guys. That was chapter 1.1. How many chapters is in the book? I don't know. No, we are nearing the end. So in chapter 1.2, we talk about interpreting information that relates to the interrelationships between major components of each body systems and its structures on page 71. So how, all the systems work together, basically, how we cannot, 71. It's just where the new chapter starts. So just realizing that, once all the systems depend on one another. So just like the lymphatic system actually depends on the cardiovascular system too, it runs parallel to that. And that it cannot run by itself, it just can't sit by itself. And then how do we achieve the holistic health that we offering our clients and even for ourselves to be our best self in being active and exercise and doing passive exercises, even doing mental exercises, doing mental checkups, and then of course our diet. So just to achieve that balance in our body. And we've heard through quite a few of the videos that spoke about homeostasis. So finding that balance. The urinary system was one of them. The lymphatic system was another one. Which other one did they mention it on? The endocrine system was one. I think they also mentioned it. So it's all the systems that, you know, that when you want to balance your hormones, you want to balance your pH in your urine, you want to balance your, you know, your toxins in your body, get rid of the toxins in your body so you don't feel poorly all the time. And encourage your, you know, your clients to, or if you have an understanding of the basics, it helps when you go in and you see somebody isn't well, you know, and you can sort of figure out, oh, perhaps they've got an infection, you know, somewhere. And then you can look at the signs of, okay, well, if the glands is up, then maybe they've got too many toxins in their body. If they, their blood pressure is high, you know, maybe there's something with their lymphatic, with their cardiovascular system wrong. If they have an infection, urine infection, then, you know, that will show in their urine, and they also have a fever from that. So we can sort of then just roughly pinpoint that we can, in a natural way, encourage people to either drink more water, or perhaps that they, you know, there's something, maybe need some exercises. And that goes for ourselves as well.
Can I just take a picture of that? Sorry.
Yeah, the previous one, yeah. So when we go into nursing, or you go into being a care worker, you we are in some ways one of the workers that have to be really holistic in our approach to care, because we cover so many bases. There's so many responsibilities. Like when the RN comes in, they're very specific on what they're doing. They specialized in the area, so they're very specific in you know, either doing medication or doing wounds or something really clinical. If you get a speech pathologist coming in, they're very specific about what their roles are. But for us, we have to have that overview. We have to have a real, so we can call in on the specialist. We can say, well, okay, maybe this person's got a problem in this area. Who's the people that is the specialist in that area that we can call those people, or refer our clients to those people. So recognize and promote ways to support healthy body functioning. That's, you know, chapter 2. We're just starting with chapter 2 now. Review factors that contribute to the maintenance of healthy bodies. So we spoke about it already: healthy diet, watching our weight, managing stress, and boosting the immune system. And that's generally the, you know, the outlook we have, because we are the ones that are feeding our clients. We're the ones that take them shopping. We're the ones that take them for walks. You know, we're the ones that are there when they go to the toilet. We are there when they wake up in the morning, you know, caring for their skin integrity. We have such a huge responsibility in all these areas. And when I did my training in the 80s, this was our main focus as AINs, was to take vital signs every day. We used to do that every morning. You know, that was the first thing. We had the charts at the bottom of the bed. So we would take the temperature, we would take their blood pressure, we would see their respiratories. And through the videos, they spoke about what is normal blood pressure. It's between 130 and 70. Anything higher than 130, then you phone the doctor, you phone the supervisor. Any higher than 70 or lower than 70, you again phone the supervisor, and you record and you watch. We have to know what's the normal temperature, 37 degrees. If somebody has a high temperature, immediately we call for help. We call for supervisor. They may have COVID, first thing, which is a worry these days, but there may be another infection somewhere else in their bodies. We need to know respiratory. Remember when we were watching the lungs, they were saying our Recipe needs to be about 20. If it's any more than that, it's alarming. It's something we have to then call for help. And so for us to know what, when to call, we need to know how to take these observations and how to, and what is the normal parameters in the observations. With oxygen, it's a tiny little thing that you put on the finger, and that records your oxygen levels. So normal oxygen levels is about 91. Maintenance of blood sugar. So generally, when somebody has when they're diabetic, they would have the little monitor thing that you put a drop of blood on, and you check the blood sugar levels. So blood sugar levels shouldn't really be more than 7, 8. There are some people that function on higher ones. I had a friend, she was a diabetic, and her blood sugar would go up to 17, 18. It's really, really important that we report that as well, because people can go into diabetic shock, what's it called? So they actually go into a coma from if their blood sugar are higher than that. So we have to manage that, and we have to check their blood sugar every morning when they wake up. So when you generally, when you have a client with this specific issue, say you go out to that old boy, what was his story? Was he had a stroke? Yeah. So if somebody's had a stroke, that's things we have to watch. We have to watch their blood pressure every day. And we have to watch their pulse and their oxygen levels. That's something that you would record every single day, because that will indicate if there is any, and a stroke happens when somebody's had a blood clot that's gone through their brain. So then we have to watch, and you have to watch they would have to take their blood every 4 days or so. How often do they take the blood? Do you know, for somebody that is on warfarin? Do you know, for the warfarin levels? It's quite often though. They check it very regular to see that if their blood is too thick or too thin, there's a danger either way. So if their blood is too thin, they can bleed out if they have a small skin tear. If it's too thick, then it can cause another tear, another stroke. And to check the signs for strokes, you'd need to know that, and you'd have to sort of equip yourself and train yourself to know that. If you work, if you work with a client with diabetes, then your office or whoever you work for will most probably give you a crash course in how to take the blood sugar. If you work with somebody with any heart problems that needs to take their blood pressure all the time, they will probably equip you and train you how to do that. But it is really indirectly part of, and although you're not getting assessed on it, part of your training that you need to know this is within our scope, to be aware of it, and that we need to be able to do that. Sadly, I'm not able to train you because, the government's blueprint doesn't really ask that from us to show that. So my company doesn't really, they're not going to invest in the equipment to train you for it. The other thing is that we need to monitor is blood pressure. What is the other one? I just thought of. If blood sugar levels are very low, that's another one you have to monitor. Somebody can, when they stand up, they can feel woozy and fall over. Oh yeah, urine test. We need to be able to do a urine test. I do the urine test, or the information about the urine test, when we do unit 23, because it comes up in there again. And the bowels, we have to monitor their bowels every day. If their bowels have opened, we need to record that. We need to record the consistency of the bowels. If they were really constipated, if they were really hard, then they still are really hard. We have to record that. Keep an eye on that. If the bowels don't open for a few days, we need to alert the supervisor. But that is as far as it goes with bowel management. We do not insert suppositories, although they do sometimes ask us to do that, but it's not within our thing. So this is again from OSMED. Some of the next few is going to be those little assessments that we should be able to do. So that is the AVPU assessment. That's when you walk into the room, is somebody awake? Are they responsive? Are they in pain? So that's our first observation. I'll go back to the beginning of that so you can just, and I'll pause it there. No, play, and then pause. AVPU assessment, which is then consisting of a rapid assessment tool. It's how can I have that word? Oh, it has it alert, verbal pain, and you unresponsive. Okay, are they alert and awake? And I won't go through it again. It might as well, it's quick. Are they verbal? Do they talk to you? Do they open their eyes and respond when you talk to them? Are they in pain? They open their eyes to verbal stimuli, and they also respond to pain. So we can touch them or give them a squeeze. If they're unresponsive, obviously you'll call 000 straight away. Okay, so response to sound.
So there's a diabetes thing this week somewhere.
Is there? Yeah, there'll probably be heaps.
Good day, everyone. I am Sanat Daniel Caceres from BSN-3B, and today I'm going to perform a return demonstration regarding the Glasgow Coma Scale. So the definition of the Glasgow Coma Scale, or GCS, is an assessment tool designed to note trends in the client's response to stimuli. The Glasgow Coma Scale can be used as an effective assessment tool in order to achieve a clear and objective evaluation of the patient's neurological status. The Glasgow Coma Scale is a standardized scoring system used to assess level of consciousness in a patient. So the Glasgow Coma Scale has three aspects of the patient's behavior are observed and recorded: eye-opening, verbal responses, and motor responses to a verbal command or painful stimulus. These assessments are further subdivided into different levels of response. The purposes of the Glasgow Coma Scale is to monitor level of consciousness in any patient who has altered sensorium, and to monitor patients with suspected or confirmed brain injury. So there are three special considerations when performing the Glasgow Coma Scale. First is that there are multiple limitations that can alter the score and not provide an accurate picture of the patient's brain injury. Second is that consideration is made for those with tracheostomy and endotracheal breathing tubes. And lastly, assess for presence of injury and edema prior to stimulation.
Swelling, edema, swelling.
First procedure is to check physician's order or nursing care plan for frequency.
So how often do you do it?
gather necessary equipment such as Glasgow comma scale form, gloves, and pen light. The next procedure is to perform hand washing. This is to prevent transmission of microorganisms. Identify the client. Good day, sir. Natawag po yung mga identification para sir ha. Provide client privacy by making sure that the client is not well exposed to other patients or other people. We should also consider the closing of hospital curtains and doors. Introduce self and explain procedure to the patient. Sir, ako pala si Santina Casares, isa ka student nurse ng University of San Agustin. Ari ko isubong para mag-perform sa inyo sa Glasgow Coma Scale para mabalaan ang inyong level of consciousness. We should wear gloves to reduce the risk of contamination and nosocomial infection. Position patient appropriately to keep the patient comfortable. Sir, position patient, sir. If the patient's eyes open spontaneously, the score is 4. But if the patient's eye don't open spontaneously, talk to the patient. Sir, good afternoon. Kamusta yung mga chat, sir? If the patient has responded to sound, this will be scored as 3. If the patient doesn't respond to sound, assess the patient's pain stimulus. If he responded, this will be scored as 2. And if there is no response at all, this will be scored as 1. Ask the patient about his name and what day is today to know if he is oriented. If the patient
Very important when somebody's had a fall and you first responded to that person.
Ako si Joshua sir.
Palalo mo ano adlaw magkatulong na sa sir.
June 18, 2021. Alas 8 sa program.
If the patient is confused, he will be scored as 4. Sir, pwede mo mas-state ang iyong mabilog na pangalan, sir?
Ang ano ba nila?
Ang iyong mabilog na pangalan, sir? Pwede mo maambal sa ako? If the patient answered in appropriate words, the score given will be 3. Sir, pwede mo maambal ang iyong mabilog na pangalan, sir?
May luwa ako ba na?
Hindi, sir. Ang pinalamin ko ang iyong mga pangalan, pwede mo maambal sa ako?
Kasi sila dahil
If the patient answered in incomprehensible sounds, the score will be 2. Sir, pwede ko mabalangin ko yung pangalan, sir?
Where's our little Filipinos now? They will be loving it.
And if there is no response at all, the score is 1. Command the patient to know his best motor response. Sir, pwede mo magbuhay mo kanila, sir? patient does not obey command but localizes the pain, he will be scored as 5. If the patient does not obey command, does not localize the pain, but withdraws the pain, he will be scored as 4. If the patient responds only with abnormal flexion, the score will be 3. If the patient responds with abnormal extension, the score will be 2. If there is no response at all, the score will be 1. Document responses in GCS sheet. Make sure to add total score at the bottom of each sheet during each assessment. Document accurately and report for changes, if any.
I know it sounds like a lot of things, but it's just a little, like a little bit of a detail to just knowing that we need to check all these different responses. And this is again from OSMED, these little videos. So it's the Australian standard as well. It might be on the, when I have an observation chart, there might be places where you can, and it will show you, and it'll probably have an overview of where you put the responses, if it's appropriate. Specifically, if you have somebody who gets seizures, that would be something that you'd have to watch. Or if you have somebody that's had a stroke, that will be important to keep an eye on that, because sometimes they can be confused, and that can indicate, again, the response team, if you have to call 000, that you give them some of this information saying the person is not responding. And that's something they will ask you anyways on the call. Is he responsive, and how responsive, that will indicate how quick the ambulance will get there. If somebody's had a heart attack, like you've had that before, again, there'll be some signs that you'd have to relay back to the response team. So let's have a little 5-minute break or 10-minute break, and then we'll carry on. It's already 12, but I think we will be done by 1, yeah.
Morning, Stephen. May I measure your respiratory rate? I would like you to place your hand across your chest. I will observe and count the number of times your chest rises and falls over 1 full minute. If the patient is unconscious, I can observe the respiration rate accurately by placing my hand on the patient's chest while observing and feeling for the rise and fall of the chest wall. I will be noting the rate and depth of respiration and also observing for the use of accessory muscles. When recording the respiration rate of an unconscious patient, I am required to count the respiratory rate for 1 full minute.
What's the rate meant to be? You remember? What's the respiratory rate need to be? Thank you.
The respiration rate was normal.
20 breaths in 1 minute. And another tip is don't tell them you're doing it. But, pretend you're taking their pulse. Because if you sit next to them, just put your hand on their tummy to feel their breath, and just hold their, pretend you're doing, or even putting your hand over their tummy, holding their pulse on the opposite hand. So they think you're doing their pulse, because if people become aware of you, because we can control that.
Yes,
They change their respiratory rate. So, yeah.
What's, if you come across some, where's the best place to, where's the quickest and best place to get a pulse? Like up here or there? Or?
The pulse is on your wrist. So if you can't, generally it's taken down underneath the thumb, but with some people it's easier on the other side. So it's either side of the big vein. So if you hold it there, you should feel the pulse, and the pulse should be less than 70.
So it never up here? Because I can find that straight away. But here I've got
You
it
could
first.
take it there, but it's more, never use your thumb. Yeah. So my pulse seemed to be better on my pinky side. For some other reason, I feel it better on my pinky side. Although, I've learned on the, can you find it? You find it? No?
Yeah, I found it.
Just gonna pause this for a sec.
So it's always good to go there on your wrist.
Wash my hands. I gain patient consent for the procedure. Hello, I'd like to take your pulse. I then assess the patient's pulse rate by palpating the radial artery and counting the beats for a whole minute. Document all relevant information.
Wouldn't it be hard, especially for nurses, if they were to take it? Because I like to yarn up and whatnot, and they're still trying. They're like, "Oh, you just be quiet." Just for 1 minute.
That's why we learn to do it sometimes even in 15 seconds, and we time it by 4. I have a chart, and I had it during a simulation, but we didn't get to use it much. These charts was they were, you can send it around. They were the charts that we learned on how to do it in the 80s. And these were the charts that was in the bottom of the to send it around. That was always on the bottom of the bed of the patients in hospital. So on that chart, I've reported some pulse rate there. So you can see the pulse. We took the pulse like every morning. So on the top, it has the temperature. So it's 37 is your normal temperature. Then your blood pressure. So I can report it on here, and then I can give you copies of this. So 37 is so you do the time, the date. So the date is the 1st of the 11th. I will give you a copy of this. And then the time, what's the time now? 12:20. So 12:20. And normal temperature is 37. You just put a dot. With the blood pressure, normal blood pressure is about 130 on 70. And then the heart rate, you record the heart rate, which the normal heart rate should be below 70. Respiratory is normal is 20. O2 sats is about 92. Pain score, that should be less than 2. So, oh, I put that the wrong way around. Less, not more. Less than 2. Nausea score, that's blood sugar should be less than, more than, how do I write that? More than 5, more than 3, less than 8. More than 3, less than 8. And bowels should be, you get bowels well open, bowels not, bowels not open, bowels medium open. I'll go make a report. I'll go make photocopies of that. So that's just the normal one. So you can go back. Yeah, go back to this for yourself, and you'll have your client's number and or the patient's number on that. As that's for yourself. You don't have to hand that in. Okay, temperature. Normal temperature is 37.
First, I clean my hands.
We used to take temperature with the underneath the arm or in the rectum of a baby or underneath the tongue when
I
you
turn
had
on the
the,
thermometer
these days they're all electronic.
and fit a probe cover. I inspect the ear for infection or obstruction that would prevent the use of the thermometer in that ear. I gently pull the pin upwards to help seat the tip of the probe, and then gently insert the probe into the center of the ear canal. I press and release the scan button. When I hear the beep, I remove the probe and check the temperature. I inform the patient of the result and then discard the probe cover. And finally, clean my hands.
The pain score is really important. So you ask them, I'm just going to pause it for a sec. So the pain score, again, they will be on the pain score, and it's hard to show the pain score for your own ear. But the pain score must be less than 2. And whenever your clients say to you verbally, I've got pain, that's 1 point. If they demonstrate, and if they can tell you, you say to them, how painful is it? If 10 is the worst and 0 or 1 is the least, and they tell you it's a 5, you call supervisor. The minute it is over a 2, going to a 3, you call for help. We can maintain somebody's pain with a heat pack or an ice pack or a bit of a rub, just rubbing the muscles or even just moving them around, as long as it's less than 2. The minute it goes over that, they need a Panadol or they need some other pain management, and we're not allowed to give that pain management. So then we call for help. So the minute they say to you, oh, it's about a 5, so it's a verbal thing. And then you remember, you probably have all seen the little pictures with the faces on where they are smiling, and then that type, you can see it in their face. Then that's obviously also, you take the score from that. You look at those little faces and you see, oh, he's up here in the middle, he's not smiling, he's not happy. If somebody's just placid, then that's maybe a 2, then you're happy with that. They say, oh, I'm in pain, but it's all right. And you can see, and I don't know what score to give you, or they're not verbal. And then you look at their face, and if, and then the other one is, of course, if they are really showing you pain, or when you touch them, they are reacting, you immediately call for help.
The PQRST mnemonic, where P stands for provokes. What provoked the pain? What makes it worse or better? Did the pain occur at rest or during exertion? Did the pain wake the patient up? Q for quality. This could be sharp, dull, squeezing, slight pressure, a burning or aching pain, a pounding pain, colic-like or cramping, or a stabbing pain. R for radiates. Does the pain move anywhere? Ask the patient to point to anywhere where he feels pain. S for severity. Ask the patient to rate the pain on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is no pain and 10 the worst pain imaginable. T for time. Ask the patient, when did it start? Was the onset slow or sudden? How long has it lasted? Is it a constant or an intermittent pain? Does it come and go? Have you had the pain previously? Is it the same as previously, or is it different from last time? And remember to document all your observations.
Okay. The BMI, I'm going to skip this one. This is generally for weight, and that's a specialist thing to calculate the BMI. Some of these things, it's not directly our responsibility, but it stays for us to be aware of these things. Okay, so chapter 2.2, evaluate the relationships between body systems and how it affects healthy functioning. If one part of your car is not working, your car is not going to run well. You know, if your fuel system has got a block in it, the car's going to go, and it's just going to pull along. So we ignore these things in our human bodies. When the engine light comes on, we drink a Panadol, we stamp that engine light off, and off we go. And there was a reason. There was a reason why the engine light came on. If you keep going, you'll end up in trouble. So you know, be aware of these vital signs, because the vital signs actually indicates something's going on. And when something's going on, that's the engine light. We need to be aware of it. We need to, and because we are the first responders, we are the ones working with somebody all the time. When you walk into their room, you will see something's wrong. This person is different to what they were yesterday. And when you notice that, then you know something's wrong, somewhere. And we're not qualified to diagnose somebody, but we certainly can see, like, you know, obviously something's wrong, and then that's where you call for help. Health issues that we may be dealing with, especially in the elderly, chronic health issues, alcoholism, sensory changes, pain, medication, dysphagia when they start struggling to swallow, and social factors with the elderly that affects their emotional well-being. They withdraw and things like that. So those are issues that we have to just be aware of. Interconnection about the relationships between different body systems. You know, the oxygen goes through our lungs. It helps our cardiovascular system. Our diets goes, you know, through our digestive system. Our cardiovascular system gets affected if we don't eat well, if we eat junk food or too much oily stuff. Homeostasis is generally balanced in the different areas: central nervous system, urinary system, endocrine system, digestive system as well. So if you eat too many acidic foods or too many carbohydrates, like you know, especially wheat germ, that's your body takes that in as sugar, and it actually pushes it up to you're highly acidic, and you know, and that's an unbalance. Obviously, if you don't have enough roughage in your system, then you know you don't get all your you don't get any you know, you don't eat solid foods or foods that have got a lot of stuff in to move your bowels, then you'll have issues there as well. Hydration, digestive system, integumentary system, urinary system, central system, all gets affected by water. Our body is 96% water. Our brain is 92% water. Nurses believe in the moon. We see when the moon is full, you know about it. You know, people are affected by the moon. So reproductive system.
What you were saying about what's that wheat germ? So too much wheat germ.
Wheat germ is not a natural. It wasn't the original. What's it called? Original seed or original plant. It's a man-made. Yeah, and yeah, it's not an original. What's the word I'm looking for? Seed. That's grain. Original grain. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. Yeah, you cannot lose or not benefit from not eating wheat germ. By all means, yeah.
So what about all grain?
Well, again, the wheat germ is in there, but it's better to pumpkin seeds and other seeds. Yeah, wheat germ is. Most people are actually intolerant to wheat germ, and that's why you get a lot of people with issues with too much. My brain is some of the day loses the words. When somebody's intolerant to, allergic to what? Gluten. Yeah, so you have a lot of people these days intolerant to gluten, and Ouija is one of them that encourages that. Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is that we've been bombarded for a long time with a lot of toxins, and then the body does struggle to deal with it eventually. To a certain extent, our body can deal with it if we have healthy spells in between. But if we continually bombard our bodies with, these toxins, then eventually it gives in. So, and we have to be headaches and stuff. Obviously, you dehydrated or there's some toxins in your body somewhere. It's no use just drinking a headache tablet. You have to go and detox and try to feel better about it. So enhance the quality of our work activities by using and sharing this information that I have shared with you today. And I have made a recording of this, so with the new ones on there, and I will be putting it onto YouTube.